Adam had been driving for so long that the world outside his windshield had become a blur of black and silver. Rain hammered the roof in waves, sometimes so heavy the road disappeared altogether. His wipers squealed with each pass, doing little to clear the smeared streaks of water. He had passed no other cars for hours. No gas stations, no houses, just endless pine trees pressing in on either side of the narrow two-lane road. The GPS had stopped updating nearly an hour ago, leaving him with only a glowing arrow floating over nothing but gray. Every so often, he'd glance at it, hoping for a street name, a number, something. But it never changed. He was starting to think he'd made a mistake taking the back roads when he saw it. Through the sheets of rain, just beyond a bend in the road, a small flickering square of light. The vacancy sign glowed faint red, each letter buzzing faintly. It bled color into the wet asphalt, reflecting in the black mirror of the puddled parking lot. The motel itself was a long strip of single-story rooms, each with the same faded door, paint peeling in vertical strips. A narrow office sat at one end, its window glowing with that tired fluorescent blue you only ever see in places like this. Something in him hesitated, every instinct whispering to keep driving. But exhaustion had sharpened into a dull ache behind his eyes. His knuckles ached from gripping the wheel, so he pulled in. The gravel crunched under his tires and then stopped. The sound seemed to get swallowed. No echo, no rain hitting the roof anymore, though it was still falling outside. When he stepped out, the air smelled like wet pavement and old oil. He crossed the short distance to the office door, the buzzing vacancy sign directly overhead, its light flickering in perfect rhythm with the ringing in his ears. The man behind the counter didn't say a word when Adam entered. He didn't even glance up right away. When he finally did, his eyes were the same pale shade as the fluorescent light above. Without looking down, he slid a brass key across the counter. The tag read, Room 6. The hallway smelled faintly of mold and stale cigarettes. The carpet's floral pattern had worn down to bare threads in places. He passed 4 closed doors before finding his. Inside, the air was warm but thick, unmoving, like it had been trapped for years. A single lamp sat in the far corner, casting an amber glow that didn't quite reach the bed. The bedspread was patterned with faded roses and cigarette burns. The curtains were heavy and drawn tight, their edges curling inward as if trying to keep something out, or in. Adam dropped his bag by the dresser and sat on the bed. The springs groaned under his weight, almost as if something beneath them had shifted. In the silence, he heard a slow drip. Water, somewhere deep inside the walls. It wasn't rhythmic, it was irregular, almost deliberate. He turned on the TV, static, turned on the tap in the bathroom. Nothing. Finally, he lay down, fully clothed. His body ached, and exhaustion dragged him under quickly. The sound woke him. Footsteps. Slow, even, just outside his door. They moved past, and then returned a few minutes later, over and over. At first he thought it was another guest, but when curiosity got the better of him, he pressed his eye to the peephole. A man passed by. Same height, same clothes, same pace. Adam waited. The steps came again. He looked again, the same man, same expression, same movements, like watching a scene on repeat. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the light outside was pale and sickly, the kind of light that feels like it belongs to late afternoon, not dawn. Adam grabbed his bag and stepped into the hallway. It was silent. The air felt heavier than the night before, pressing against his chest. When he entered the lobby, he stopped cold. Every seat was occupied. Men, women, even a child. They sat perfectly still, facing the same direction, their eyes wide open and fixed on nothing. Dust clung to their clothes, their hair, their lashes. The faint sound of breathing broke the stillness, but it was shallow, as if each inhale was an effort. No one looked at him. No one blinked. He approached the desk. The clerk stood there, smiling faintly. "Checking out?" he asked, his voice soft but sharp at the edges. Adam nodded. The clerk's smile didn't change. "You won't be leaving just yet." Adam turned to the door, but when he pushed, it didn't move. Not locked, not stuck, just unmovable. Behind him, the clerk began walking around the desk. From the hallway he had just come from, Adam heard it again, those same slow, even footsteps. They were closer this time. He backed up against the door, heart hammering, eyes darting between the clerk and the hallway. The clerk's smile widened. "Room 6 is still yours." The footsteps reached the lobby entrance, and that's where Adam's memory fades. The next thing he remembers is waking up in the bed, in the same stale air, the same floral bedspread. Through the curtain gap, the vacancy sign still buzzed outside. Only now, the letters had changed. They read, "No checkout." It was nearly sunset when Claire found the path. She had been hiking alone for hours, following a thin trail through the forest that wasn't marked on any map. The air had that stillness that comes right before nightfall, when the wind dies and the sounds of birds and insects fade into silence. She'd been hoping the trail would circle back toward her car, but instead, it narrowed into a tunnel of trees. Branches knitted overhead, blocking out what little light was left. Then, through the shadows ahead, she saw something unexpected. A patch of open space, pale in the dim light, and in the middle of it, a playground. It was old, not just unused, forgotten. Rusted swing sets leaned at odd angles, their chains hanging like bones stripped of flesh. The slide was coated in flaking red paint, metal warped from years of weather. And yet, one swing moved. Not much, just a slow, deliberate sway that didn't match the stillness in the air. Claire froze. Her eyes swept the tree line, searching for a cause, a breeze, an animal, a person, but found nothing. The air smelled faintly metallic. Old rain, trapped and stale. She stepped closer, her shoes crunching on gravel buried under moss. The merry-go-round was the centerpiece, an old iron disc with chipped blue paint. Someone had carved shapes into it. Not words, not anything she recognized. Sharp, jagged lines that curled and split like broken branches. She reached out to touch one of the carvings and stopped when she noticed the rust. It was fresh. Beneath the red-brown layer, the cuts were clean, as if they'd been made days ago. The woods seemed to lean closer. She turned slowly, scanning the tree line. It was darker now, much darker than it should have been at this hour. Her phone read 6:42 p.m., but the light said otherwise. That was when she heard it, a creak, long, drawn out. She turned toward the swings. All of them were moving now, slow, steady arcs in perfect unison. Her mouth went dry, the air grew colder, and the smell of rust became overwhelming, like she was breathing it in. She backed away, eyes fixed on the swings, and nearly tripped over the edge of the merry-go-round. She was ready to leave, to run, when the mist began to rise. It seeped from the ground itself, curling around the base of the slide, spilling over the merry-go-round, swallowing the swings. Through the haze, she saw movement in the tree line. Not branches swaying, not animals, shapes, human-sized, but wrong in proportion. Their limbs too long, their heads tilted unnaturally to the side. They didn't step forward, they just watched. Every instinct screamed at her to look away, but she couldn't. The swings kept moving in that perfect rhythm, as if pulled by invisible hands, and then, without a sound, they all stopped at once. The clearing was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. The shapes in the trees were gone. The mist began to thin. But the smell of rust lingered, heavy and sharp, until it coated her tongue. She ran, didn't look back, didn't stop until she reached the road. Later, when she checked the map, there was no clearing, no path, no record of a playground in that forest. And yet, for days afterward, when she closed her eyes, she swore she could still hear it. That slow, deliberate creak of a swing moving in airless silence. It was a little past 2 in the morning when Dale's eyes began to sting. 10 hours behind the wheel, hauling an empty flatbed through the back roads of northern Oregon, had turned the world outside his windshield into a blur of black and silver. The road ahead was silent. No other vehicles, no houses, just the rhythm of the yellow lines and the occasional shimmer of wet asphalt catching the light. He was somewhere between two small towns he'd never heard of, or maybe already passed them. His GPS had gone dark 40 minutes ago, the screen frozen on an empty stretch of road. Cell service was gone not long after. The radio was tuned low to a local country station, faint static creeping in around the edges of each song. And then, without warning, the music cut out, a burst of static, sharp enough to make him wince. Then a voice. It was low, calm, measured, like every word was chosen. Driver of the red Peterbilt on Highway 47, keep moving. Do not stop for anything. Dale's knuckles tightened around the wheel. For a moment, he thought he'd misheard it. That fatigue had finally started to play tricks on him. But the way the words lingered in the cab made his skin prickle. He reached for the radio dial, but the voice was gone. The station returned, as if nothing had happened. Highway 47. He didn't remember seeing a sign for that. He glanced into the mirrors. Both sides showed nothing but fog swallowing the tail end of his headlights. The air in the cab suddenly felt colder. Dale leaned back in his seat, trying to convince himself it was nothing. Maybe a late-night prank, maybe a random signal from a CB chatter bleeding into the FM band, but the way that voice had said, "Driver of the red Peterbilt," it wasn't guessing. It was talking to him. The road curved, the trees on either side growing denser. The fog thickened until his high beams became nothing more than pale cones in the dark. Then the radio crackled again. Do not stop, not for lights, not for signs, not for anyone. His stomach twisted. The voice was steady, but there was weight behind it now. Urgency hidden beneath the calm. Dale checked the mirrors again. Still nothing but empty road. Up ahead, through the mist, 2 points of light appeared. At first, he thought they were headlights, but they weren't steady. They swayed, like lanterns carried by something walking. He eased his foot off the accelerator, unsure if it was a person or an animal. The radio cut in, louder this time. Do not stop. The lights drew closer, weaving slowly until, without a sound, they split, one drifting left, the other right, disappearing into the trees. Dale kept driving. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to turn around, but he couldn't make himself do it. The voice came back only once in the next 15 minutes. You're almost there. The fog thinned just enough for Dale to see it. A slow, steady red blink against the night sky. A radio tower. He couldn't remember the last time he'd passed one. Out here, they were rare, relics from an older era of roadside communication. The voice returned, but the calm was gone. It was faster now. Keep going. Do not stop. Whatever you see, keep going. Static surged so loud it made him flinch. The road narrowed, twisting through a patch of forest so thick it seemed to absorb his headlights. The tower's light blinked in and out between the trees. And then he saw the first figure. It stood just off the shoulder, tall and motionless, like a scarecrow set in the wrong place. Its head turned as he passed, no features, just a shape in the mist. And then it was gone. 100 yards later, another one appeared. Then another. Each one perfectly still, always facing him, always vanishing the moment they slipped behind the cab. The voice returned, now so faint he could barely hear it over the static. Almost there. Dale gripped the wheel, his eyes locked on the blinking red light ahead. But when he rounded the last bend, the tower wasn't there. The light was gone, the fog was thicker than ever, and the road just kept going. He drove until the first gray light of dawn touched the horizon. When he finally reached a gas station in a small town hours later, he asked the clerk how far he was from Highway 47. The man stared at him for a long moment. There is no Highway 47. Dale didn't mention the voice, he didn't mention the figures. But when he glanced back at his truck, the radio's station dial was still glowing faint green, tuned to a frequency that didn't exist. Whether it's a road, a playground, or a room you shouldn't have entered, they're all still out there, waiting. And one day, when you least expect it, you'll find yourself standing right where the story left off. Welcome back to the Shadow Hour.